to our Bible meditation. This reading is for January 26, 2024, and we're reading Leviticus 11, 12, 13, and 14. And our lighting is terrible today, and we can't fix it. I don't know why, but we'll work something out in the future. So it's all yours.
We're reading from the New King James Version. Leviticus 11. Food permitted and forbidden. Now the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying to them, Speak to the children of Israel, saying, These are animals which you may eat among all animals that are on the earth. Among the animals, whatever divides the hoof, having cloven hoofs, and chewing the cud, that you may eat. Nevertheless, these you shall not eat among those who chew the cud, or those who have cloven hoofs. The camel, because it chews its cud but does not have cloven hooves, is unclean to you. The rock hyrax, because it chews the cud but does not have cloven hooves, is unclean to you. The hare, because it chews the cud but does not have cloven hooves, is unclean to you. The swine, though it divides the hoof, having cloven hooves, yet does not chew the cud, is unclean to you. Their flesh you shall not eat, and their carcasses you shall not touch, because they are unclean to you. These you may eat of all that are in the water. Whatever in the water has fins and scales, whether in the seas or the rivers, that you may eat. But all in the seas or in the river that do not have fins or scales, all that move in the water, or any living thing which is in the water, they are an abomination to you. They shall be an abomination to you. You shall not eat their flesh, but you shall regard their carcasses as an abomination. Whatever is in the water does not have fins or scales, that shall be an abomination to you. And these you shall regard as abomination among the birds that shall not be eaten. They are an abomination. The eagle, the vulture, the buzzard, the kite, the falcon, and after its kind. Every raven after its kind. The ostrich, the short-eared owl, the seagull, the hawk after its kind. The little owl, the fisher owl, the screech owl, the white owl, the jackdaw, and the carrion vulture, the stork, the heron after its kind, the hopi, and the bat. All flying insects that creep on all fours shall be an abomination to you. Yet these you may eat of every flying insect that creeps on all fours. Those which have jointed legs above their feet, which do leap on the earth, these you may eat. The locust after its kind, the destroying locust after its kind, the cricket after its kind, the grasshopper after its kind. But all other flying insects which have 4 feet shall be an abomination to you. Unclean animals, by these you shall become unclean. Whoever touches the carcass of any of these shall be unclean until evening. Whoever carries part of the carcass, any of them shall wash their clothes and be unclean until evening. The carcass of any animal which divides its foot but is not cloven hoofed, or does not chew the cud, is unclean to you. Everyone who touches it shall be unclean. And whatever goes on its paws among all kinds of animals that go on all 4, these are unclean to you. Whoever touches such carcasses shall be unclean until evening. Whoever carries such carcass shall wash his clothes and be unclean until evening. It's unclean to you. These shall also be unclean to you among the creeping things that creep on the earth: the mole, the mouse, the large lizard after its kind, the gecko, the monitor lizard, sand reptile, sand lizard, and the camion. These are unclean to you among all that creep. Whoever touches them when they are dead shall be unclean until evening. Anything which any of them falls when they are dead shall be unclean, whether it's any item of wood or clothing or skin or sack, whatever that item is, in which any work is done, it must be put in water. and it shall be unclean until evening, then it shall be clean. Any earthen vessel into which any of them fall, you shall break, and whatever in it shall be unclean. In such a vessel, any edible food upon which water falls becomes unclean, and any drink that must be drunk from it becomes unclean. And everything on which a part of any such carcass falls shall be unclean. Whether it's an oxen or a cooking stove, it shall be broken down, for they are unclean, and shall be unclean to you. Nevertheless, a spring or a cistern in which there's running water shall be clean. But whatever touches any such carcass becomes unclean. And if any part of such carcass falls on any planting seed which is to be sown, it remains unclean. But if water is put on the seed, and any part of the such carcass falls on it, it becomes unclean to you. And if any animal which you may eat dies, he who touches its carcass shall be unclean until evening. He who eats of its carcass shall wash his clothes and be unclean until evening. He also who carries his carcass shall wash his clothes and be unclean until evening. And every creeping thing that creeps on the earth shall be an abomination. It shall not be eaten, whatever crawls on its belly, whatever goes on all fours, and whatever has many feet among the creeping things that creep on earth. These you shall not eat, for they are an abomination. You shall not make yourself an abominable with any creeping thing that creeps, nor shall you make yourselves unclean, lest you be defiled by them. For I am the Lord your God. You shall therefore consecrate yourself. You shall be holy, for I am holy. Neither shall you defile yourselves with any creeping thing that creeps on the earth, for I am the Lord who brings you up out of the land of Egypt to be your God. You shall therefore be holy, because I'm holy. This is the law of the animals and of the birds, and of every living creature that moves in the water, and of every creature that creeps on the earth, to distinguish between the unclean and the clean, and between animals that may be eaten, and any animal that may not be eaten.
Okay, Leviticus 12, the ritual after childbirth. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, saying, If a woman has conceived and born a male child, then she shall be unclean 7 days. As in the days of her customary impurity, she shall be unclean. And on the 8th day the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised. She shall then continue in the blood of her purification 33 days. She shall not touch any hallowed thing, nor come into the sanctuary until the days of her purification are fulfilled. But if she bears a female child, then she shall be unclean 2 weeks, as in her customary impurity, and she shall continue in the blood of her purification 66 days. When the days of her purification are fulfilled, whether for a son or a daughter, she shall bring to the priest a lamb of the first year as a burnt offering, and a young pigeon or a turtle dove as a sin offering, to the door of the tabernacle of meeting. Then he shall offer it before the Lord, and make atonement for her, and she shall be clean from the flow of her blood. This is the law for her who has borne a male or female, and if she is not able to bring a lamb, then she may bring 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, as one as a burnt offering, and the other as a sin offering. So the priest shall make atonement for her, and she shall be clean.
Isn't that amazing? 30 days for a boy and 70 days for a girl.
66 days, 33 days, yeah.
Well, 2 weeks and 2 weeks, and then 66 more days.
Yeah, he doubled the time.
Yeah, wow. Leviticus 13, the law concerning leprosy. And the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, When a man has on the skin of his body a swelling, a scab, or bright spot, and it becomes on the skin of his body like a leprous sore, then he shall be brought to Aaron the priest, or to one of his sons, the priest shall examine the sore on the skin of the body, and if the hair on the sore has turned white, the sore appears to be deeper than the skin of his body, it is a leprous sore. Then the priest shall examine him and pronounce him unclean. But if the bright spot is white on the skin and does not appear to be deeper than the skin, and its hair is not turned white, then the priest shall isolate the one who has a sore 7 days. And the priest shall examine him on the seventh day, and if indeed the sore appears to be as it was, the sore is not spread on the skin, then the priest shall isolate him another 7 days. Then the priest shall examine him again on the seventh day, and indeed, if the sore has faded and has not spread on the skin, then the priest will pronounce him clean. It was only a scab, and he shall wash his clothes and be clean. But if the scab should at all spread over the skin, after he's been set apart, seen by the priest for his cleansing, he shall be seen by the priest again. And if the priest sees the scab has indeed spread on the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is leprosy. When the leprous sore on a person, he shall be brought to a priest. Then the priest shall examine him, and indeed, if the swelling on the skin is white, and is turned to hair white, and there's a spot of raw flesh in the swelling, it is an old leprosy on the skin of the body, and the priest shall pronounce him unclean, and shall not isolate him, for he's unclean. And, and if the leprosy breaks out all over the skin, and covers all the skin of the one who has a sore, from his head to foot, wherever the priest look, then the priest shall consider, and indeed, if the leprosy has covered all his body, he shall pronounce him clean, who has the sore. It has all turned white, he is clean. But if the raw flesh appears on him, he shall be unclean, and if the priest examines the raw flesh and pronounces him unclean, for the raw flesh is unclean, it's leprosy. Or if the raw flesh changes and turns white again, he shall come to the priest. Priest will examine him, and indeed, if the sore turn white, the priest shall pronounce him clean, who has the sore is clean. If the body develops a boil in the skin, and it is healed, in the place of the boil there comes a white swelling, or a bright spot, reddish white, then it shall be shown to the priest. And if the priest sees it, it is indeed appears deeper than the skin, and his hair is turned white, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a leprous sore which is broken out of the boil. But if the priest examines it, and indeed there is no white hairs in it, and is not deeper than the skin, but it has faded, then the priest will isolate him for 7 days, and if it should spread all over the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a leprous sore. But if the bright spot stays in one place and has not spread, it is the scar of the boil, and the priest shall pronounce him clean. Or if the body receives a burn on its skin by fire, the raw flesh of the burn becomes bright spot, reddish white or white, then the priest shall examine it, and indeed if the hair of the bright spot has turned white and appears deeper than the skin, it is leprosy broken out under the skin. Broken out in the burn. Therefore the priest shall pronounce him unclean, it's a leprous sore. But if the priest examines it, and indeed there is no white hair in the bright spot, and it's not deeper than the skin, but has faded, then the priest shall isolate him 7 days. And the priest shall examine him on the seventh day. If it has at all spread over skin, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It's a leprous sore. But if the bright spot stays in one place and is not spread on the skin, but has faded, it is a swelling from the burn. The priest will pronounce him clean, for it's a scar from the burn. If a man or woman has a sore on the head or the beard, then the priest shall examine her sore, and indeed if it appears deeper in the skin, and there's a thin yellow hair, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It's a scaly leprosy of the head or beard. But if the priest examines the scaly sore, and indeed is not appear deeper than the skin, there's no black hair in it, then the priest shall isolate the one who has a scale 7 days. And on the seventh day the priest shall examine the sore, and indeed if the scale is not spread, there's no yellow hair in it, and the scale does not appear deeper than the skin, he shall shave himself, but the scale he shall not shave. And the priest shall isolate the one who has the scale another 7 days. On the seventh day, priest shall examine the scale, and indeed, if the scale is not spread over the skin, does not appear deeper in the skin, then the priest shall announce him clean. He shall wash all his clothes and be clean. But if the scale should at all spread over the skin after his cleansing, then the priest shall examine him. And indeed, if the scale has spread over the skin, the priest should not seek for yellow hair, he's unclean. But if the scale appears to be at a standstill, and there's black hair growing upon it, the scale is healed, he is clean, and the priest shall pronounce him clean. If a man or woman has bright spots on the skin of the body, especially white bright spots, then the priest shall look, and indeed, if the bright spots on the skin of the body are dull white, it is a white spot that grows on the skin. He or she is clean. As for the man whose hair has fallen from his head, he is bald, but he's clean. He whose hair has fallen from his forehead, he is bald on the forehead, for he is clean. And if there is on the bald head or bald forehead a reddish white sore, it is leprosy breaking out on his bald head or his bald forehead. Then the priest shall examine it, and indeed, if the swelling of the sore is reddish white on his bald head or bald forehead, as the appearance of leprosy on the skin of the body, he is a leprous man. He's unclean, and the priest shall surely pronounce him unclean. His sore is on his head. Now the leper on whom the sore is, his clothes shall be torn, his head bare, and he shall cover his mustache, and cry, unclean, unclean. He shall be unclean all the days he has a sore, he shall be unclean. He is unclean, he shall dwell alone. His dwelling should be outside the camp. When the days of purification are fulfilled, whether for
Right.
what happened?
I don't know. You're in Leviticus 13.
What was I supposed to be on? 14?
Oh. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm on
you're on
13.
13, yeah. Let's see. The law concerning lepers, 47. Let's see. Where are you at? Oh, you're on Leviticus 12. It says, I don't know what happened here.
The devil.
Now you're on 13. You're at 47. A little technical difficulty here. It's suddenly switched over to 47. Yeah, there.
The law concerning leprous garments. Also, if a garment is leprous, has a leprous plague in it, whether it's a wooden garment or a linen garment, whether it's in the warp or the woof of the linen or wool, whether it's in the leather or anything made of leather, or if the plague is greenish or reddish in the garment, or in the leather, or in the wrap or the wool, or in anything made of leather, it's a leprous plague and should be shown to the priest. The priest shall examine the plague and isolate that which the plague has plagued 7 days. And he shall examine the plague on the seventh day, and if the plague has spread into the garment, either in the wrap or the in the leather or anything made of leather, the plague is an active leprosy, it's unclean. He shall therefore burn that garment in which the plague, whether warp or woof, in wool or in linen or anything leather, for it is active leprosy. The garment shall be burned in the fire. But if the priest examines it, and indeed the plague is not spread in the garment, either in the warp or the woof, or anything made of leather, then he shall command that they wash the thing which is the plague. He shall isolate it for another 7 days. Then the priest shall examine the plague after it has been washed, and indeed, if the plague has not changed its color, though the plague has not spread, it is unclean, and you shall burn it in the fire. It continues eating away whether damage is outside or inside. If the priest examines it, and indeed the plague has faded after washing it, then he shall tear it out of the garment, whether of the warp or of the woof or leather. But if it appears again in the garment, either in the woof, the warp, or anything made of leather, it is a spreading plague, and you shall burn it with fire in that which is the plague. And if it wash the garment, either wolf, or made of leather, if the plague has disappeared from it, then it shall be washed a second time, and it's clean. This is the law of the leper plague in a garment of wool, linen, warp, woof, or anything made of leather, to pronounce it clean or unclean.
Okay. Leviticus 14. The ritual for cleansing healed lepers. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, This shall be the law of the leper for the day of his cleansing. He shall be brought to the priest, and the priest shall go out of the camp, and the priest shall examine him. And indeed, if the leprosy is healed in the leper, then the priest shall command to take for him who is to be cleansed 2 living and clean birds, cedar wood, scarlet, and hyssop. And the priest shall command that one of the birds be killed in an earthen vessel over running water. For as the living bird, he shall take it, the cedar wood, and the scarlet, and the hyssop, and dip them and the living bird in the blood of the bird that was killed over the running water. And he shall sprinkle it 7 times on him who is to be cleansed from the leprosy, and shall pronounce him clean, and shall let the living bird loose in the open field. He who is to be cleansed shall wash his clothes, shave off all his hair, and wash himself in water, that he may be clean. After that he shall come into the camp, and shall stay outside his tent 7 days. But on the 7th day he shall shave all the hair off his head, and his beard, and his eyebrows, all his hair he shall shave off. He shall wash his clothes, and wash his body in water, and he shall be clean. And on the 8th day he shall take 2 male lambs without blemish, 1 ewe lamb of the first year without blemish, 3/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with oils as a grain offering, and 1 log of oil. Then the priest who makes him clean shall present the man who is to be made clean, and those things before the Lord at the door of the tabernacle of meeting. And the priest shall take 1 male lamb, and offer it as a trespass offering, and the log of oil, and wave them as a wave offering before the Lord. Then he shall kill the lamb in the place where he kills the sin offering and the burnt offering, in a holy place. For as the sin offering is the priest's, so is the trespass offering. It is most holy. The priest shall take some of the blood of the trespass offering, and the priest shall put it on the tip of the right ear of him who is to be cleansed, on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot. And the priest shall take some of the log of oil, and pour it into the palm of his own left hand. Then the priest shall dip his right finger in the oil that is in the left hand, and shall sprinkle some of the oil with his finger 7 times before the Lord. And of the rest of the oil in his hand the priest shall put some on the tip of his right ear of him who is to be cleansed, on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot, on the blood of the trespass offering. The rest of the oil that is in the priest's hand he shall put on the head of him who is to be cleansed. So the priest shall make atonement for him before the Lord. Then the priest shall offer the sin offering, and make atonement for him who is to be cleansed from the uncleanness. Afterward he shall kill the burnt offering. And the priest shall offer the burnt offering and the grain offering on the altar. So the priest shall make atonement for him, and he shall be clean. But if he is poor and cannot afford it, then he shall take 1 male lamb as a trespass offering to be waved, to make atonement for him, 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with oil as a grain offering, a log of oil, and 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, such as he is able to afford. One shall be a sin offering, and the other a burnt offering. He shall bring them to the priest on the 8th day for his cleansing, to the door of the tabernacle of meeting before the Lord. And the priest shall take the lamb of the trespass offering and the log of oil, and the priest shall wave them as a wave offering before the Lord. Then he shall kill the lamb of the trespass offering, and the priest shall take some of the blood of the trespass offering, and put it on the tip of the right ear of him who is to be cleansed, on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot. And the priest shall pour some of the oil into the palm of his own left hand. Then the priest shall sprinkle with his right finger some of the oil that is on his left, and 7 times before the Lord. And the priest shall put some of the oil that in his hand on the tip of the right ear of him who is to be cleansed, on the thumb of the right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot, on the place of the blood of the trespass offering. The rest of the oil that is in the priest's hand he shall put on the head of him who is to be cleansed, to make atonement for him before the Lord. And he shall offer one of the turtle doves or young pigeons, such as he can afford, such as he is able to afford, the one as a sin offering and the other as a burnt offering, with the grain offering. So the priest shall make atonement for him who is to be cleansed before the Lord. This is the law for one who had a leprous sore, who cannot afford the usual cleansing. The law concerning leprous houses. And the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, When you have come into the land of Canaan, which I give you as a possession, and I put the leprous plague in a house in the land of your possession, and he who owns the house comes and tells the priest, saying, It seems to me that there is some plague in our house, then the priest shall command that they empty the house, before the priest goes to examine the plague, that all that is in the house may not be made unclean. And afterward the priest shall go in to examine the house. And he shall examine the plague, and indeed, if the plague is on the walls of the house with ingrained streaks, greenish or reddish, which appears to be deep in the wall, then the priest shall go out of the house to the door of the house, and shut up the house 7 days. And the priest shall come again on the 7th day and look, and indeed, if the plague has spread on the walls of the house, then the priest shall command that they take away the stones in which is the plague, and they shall cast them into the unclean place outside the city. And he shall cause the house to be scraped inside all around, and the dust that they scrape off they shall pour out in an unclean place outside the city. Then they shall take other stones and put them in the place of those stones, and he shall take other mortar and plaster the house. Now if the plague comes back and breaks out in the house, after he has taken away the stones, after he has scraped the house, and after it is plastered, then the priest shall come and look. And indeed, if the plague has spread in the house, it is an active leprosy in the house, it is unclean. And he shall break down the house, its stones, its timber, and all the plaster of the house, and he shall carry them outside the city to an unclean place. Moreover, he who goes into the house at all while it is shut up shall be unclean until evening. And he who lies down in the house shall wash his clothes, and he who eats in the house shall wash his clothes. But if the priest comes in and examines it, and indeed the plague has not spread in the house after the house was plastered, then the priest shall pronounce the house clean, because the plague is healed. And he shall take, to cleanse the house, 2 birds, cedar wood, scarlet, and hyssop. Then he shall kill one of the birds in an earthen vessel over running water. And he shall take the cedar wood, the hyssop, the scarlet, and the living bird, and dip them in the blood of the slain bird, and in the running water, and sprinkle the house 7 times. And he shall cleanse the house with the blood of the third bird, with the bird and running water, and the living bird, with the cedar wood, the hyssop, and the scarlet. Then he shall let the living bird loose outside the city in the open field, and make atonement for the house, and it shall be clean. This is the law for many lepers sore and scale, for the leprosy of a garment and for a house, for a swelling and a scab and a bright spot, to teach when it is unclean and when it is clean. This is the law of leprosy.
Mm.
It's almost read like a, a medical manual
I was going to say medical manual.
describing, because they didn't have pictures to describe what it looks like when you have leprosy. Something that we in our culture here don't know of.
Yep.
But isn't it interesting that leprosy can spread to the walls and it looks green? It
I-
has ingrained streaks, greenish or reddish. It can get into the wall. That's strange, isn't it?
I didn't know that. Did you?
No, it's like, what is this? What is leprosy? Exactly. That it can, infest the whole house. And if it's so bad, you even have to tear it down or even,
Burn it.
huh? Yeah. Well,
Wow. Well, it's really funny because I was going to say almost sounds like a medical journal.
yeah.
Yeah. So that concludes reading today, folks. Once again, read your Bible, read your scriptures, ask the Holy Spirit. Open your eyes to see and your ears to hear.
Amen. We will see you all tomorrow on Saturday.
God bless you all.
Be blessed.